There it is. Whoa. Well, the first thing is, when everybody leaves and you're the only one left, I guess it's your turn, right? So I would like to welcome, first of all the people watching on the internet. And I'd also like to tell all of our piano players that aren't here today, we really miss you and come home soon. Okay. Now, for today, I have a story to tell. The story is about a young man named Bruiser. He's about 15, and he's at school. And I don't know if you've ever been at school, but sometimes kids can be a little bit mean to other kids. But this is a little bit different situation. Bruiser was the tallest kid in his whole class. He was quite tall. So they didn't make fun of him to his face, but, whispering about. And one of the kids that was making fun of him, his name was Tennyson. And they knew that Bruiser didn't have any parents. At least they didn't know the story. They just knew that he was living with his uncle. And so the kids started the story that Bruiser had murdered his parents. Yeah. And then they nicknamed him Bruiser because he never spoke up. He never talked in class. He was just quiet and did what he had to do. So, now called Bruiser, it did not affect him. He had other things on his mind. But one day, he went to the library. Now, there was a girl that was also in his class, but she didn't have any sections with him. She was the same age, just different sections. And she knew her brother had mentioned Bruiser, and so she figured by looking at him, he wore his pants that hit him about the ankle, and he wore old shirts. So, they were picking on him. He didn't have any of the new clothing. And so she looked at him and go, I wonder what he wants here. And so he's looking over in the book. She says, well, I'm going to find out. I want to know who this Bruiser is. So she goes up to him and says, can I help you? And he goes, oh, well, yeah. I says, I'm looking for a book of poetry. And she goes, knowing what people are saying, poetry? And he goes, yes. He says, my mom used to read it to me. And so he liked it. So she helped him. Now she's thinking in her head, the guy called Bruiser likes poetry? So she kept talking with him and got to know him and found out that he has a little brother, 9 years old, Cody. And when he got ready to check out his book, she knew she couldn't write down Bruiser, so she didn't know his name. So when they got up there, she asked for his library card. So when he handed the library card, then she saw his name was Bruiser, not Bruiser. So then she became very bold, and she says, would you like to go play miniature golf sometime? And Bruiser was kind of surprised, but he thought for a little bit. He tells her, well, I'll see if I can make it work. And there's more to the story we'll get to, why he made that statement. But he wanted to go. And so he left. Well, that night, when Bronette, that was her name, went home, Tennyson is her twin brother. He's the one that started all the rumors. So when she told him that she had a date with Bruiser, he about flipped out. Oh, that murderer? He was believing his own lies, So found out that they were going to play miniature golf. So the next day they made arrangements when they could do it. And Bruiser said, "Can I bring my little brother?" And she said, "Sure." And but Tennyson did not ask, or Bronette did not ask Tennyson to come. So they go to play miniature golf, and every time they're at a different hole, there was somebody behind the bushes watching them. So finally, Bronette says, "Just come out and play with us, Tennyson." He was trying to protect his sister from the Bruiser, you know. And so he came out, and they played, and they had a good time. So then they went from there, and Bronette said, "Well, how about let's go for a hike?" They had a hills with the little trail goes up to the top, and it says, "We'll make it a picnic day." And Bruiser's like, "Okay." Again, I have to figure out how to do this. So they made plans, and they got it set up so that they could both go. And again, Cody went with them, but Tennyson didn't come. And so they started hiking up this hill, and they get almost to the top, and Bronette steps on a rock and twists her ankle. So she can't hardly step on it. It was starting to swell. So Bruiser says, let me see it. So she lifted her leg, and he touched it. And wow, immediately she felt better. And she goes, "How can that be?" So they ate their lunch, and they decided not to go all the way, and they started back down the hill. And she noticed that now Bruiser was limping really bad on that foot, the same one that she had injured. And she's going, "I didn't see him twist his ankle." But she kept that in her head. So they get back down the hill to another day. Now, one day, Bruiser was in the library talking to Bronette, and time slipped past. And so he went to get his brother, little brother, but it was too late. He had already got on the bus and headed home. So now he knew he had to hurry. So he took off, and he gets to the driveway of their house. Now, where the uncle lived was at the edge of town. He had a couple acres. They had a cow, one cow. But the uncle didn't really want the children, but now that he had them, he had a weird way of, he tried to make them do all the work, so he did nothing. So anyway, the uncle was home, so Bruiser knew it was going to be problems. And he saw that the uncle had taken Cody and was leading him out to the garage. So Cody hadn't really done anything wrong, but this is how the uncle controlled Bruiser. Because the uncle was actually afraid of Bruiser because he was bigger than he was. So he seen Bruiser coming down the road. He took Cody in the garage, locked the door, and then he got the whip out. And Bruiser stood there. This will not happen. But Bruiser stood there and watched him whip Cody. But Cody did not feel a thing. How is that? Bruiser felt everything. He took all the pain. This was a gift or a curse that Bruiser had. So Cody was okay. And now you know why Bruiser had to be home. Protect Cody. One time Cody was climbing on the ladder, coming down off the roof. He fell and broke his arm. Bruiser went over, helped him up. Now Bruiser's arm was broken. Cody's was fine. Different, wasn't it? So this is what Bruiser was dealing with. He had an uncle that was quite mean, and he was protecting his brother. So now back to school. PE class. Tennyson was still checking out Bruiser. Who is this guy? What is he about? And so in PE class, Bruiser was usually the last one to change to go out to classes again. So Tennyson hung back and kind of peeked around the corner. And Bruiser looked around a little bit, took off his shirt, put on his school shirt, and Tennyson couldn't believe what he saw. He had scars up and down his back, whipping scars. So now that got Tennyson excited. His uncle or somebody is beating him. And he wanted to become a detective to find out what's going on. So his sister, Bronette, had now asked Bruiser to go swimming. And Bruiser says, I can't swim. I don't know how. And she says, well, you could just wade in the pool, because she was on the swimming team, so she wanted to swim. And she says, I really want you to come. And so Bruiser said, okay. And he brought Cody. And so when Tennyson also came, and when Bronette and Tennyson came, Bruiser was already in the water. He left his shirt on, his T-shirt. And Cody was splashing around. So they came and they swam, and they're getting ready to leave. And they watched as Bruiser climbed out of the pool. That you've seen a wet T-shirt, what happens? It clings to you. And so now Bronette saw, not only did he have scars on the back, but on his front. And as he climbed out of the pool, they could see that his legs were also whipped. So now this got Tennyson really going. He's going, got to do something. No longer was Bruiser this big bad murderer. So one day after school, he said, I'm going to follow him home. We don't know where Brewster lives. So he followed Brewster home, and as they were getting into the driveway, Brewster was walking ahead because he was, the other guy was sneaking behind, supposedly. But Bruiser noticed that the cow was laying down in the field. It wasn't moving. And so then he also turned around and he says, well, Tennyson, you might as well come out. I know you've been following me home. So Tennyson came out. They looked at their cow. And, they kind of liked the cow. Him and Cody took care of it. But it looked like it had died. So he goes up to the house, and the uncle comes out and says, you go clean up that cow. He says, I can't hire a company to come pick it up, so you're going to have to chop it up and throw it away. So, Bruiser says, how am I going to do that? He says, there's a chainsaw in the garage. And so Bruiser said, well, Tennyson, you might as well go home. I have things to do. Tennyson said, nope, not going home. I'm going to help you. So the two boys worked for several hours chopping up this cow and throwing it in different garbage cans they could find. When they got done, Tennyson came up to the house, and Bruiser had him come in and clean up, and then he went home. But he also saw how the uncle was. Now, a couple weeks later, there was a big black limousine sitting in front of the uncle's house when he came home from school. And it was from the mortuary. And as Bruiser got closer to the car, the uncle came out of the house. The guy came out of the car, got out of the car, and the uncle says, I'll take that letter. And basically it was the funeral director said, no, I'm giving this to Bruiser only. That was my orders. So he gave the letter to Bruiser and said, your mother has asked me to come and pick you up and take you to her funeral. So Bruiser says, how am I going to do that? He says, there's a chainsaw in the garage. And so then he also turned around and he said, well, Tennyson, you might as well come out. I know you've been following me home. So Tennyson, Tennyson said, nope, not going home. I'm going to help you. So the two boys worked for several hours chopping up this cow and throwing it in different garbage cans they could find. When they got done, Tennyson came up to the house, and So it was a shock, but in the letter, as they rode to the funeral, he read the rest of the story. Why did the mother just dump him off? Well, like they didn't have a father, and the week before she had taken him to the uncle's, she had found out she had inoperable cancer. And she knew that as the cancer would grow, that Bruiser would take it, and he would die, not her. And she couldn't do that. So she came up with a plan, and she couldn't even communicate with him, because if she knew if she did, he would come find her, and then he would die. So they got through the funeral, but now they knew why their mother had done what she did. But the uncle stayed the same. Now he knew that they were his, and so he could do basically whatever he needed to do. So a few more weeks passed. Bruiser and Cody came home again from school, and they noticed the uncle's car was there. It was way too early. His car shouldn't have been there. And when they came in, the uncle was sitting in his easy chair, but he wasn't moving very fast, and he was talking lightly, and he says, "Brewster, come here." And so Brewster came over a little closer. He says, come on over. And just as Brewster was almost there, the uncle lunged out after him to try to grab onto him. And Brewster jumped away. The uncle fell on the floor, grabbing his chest. So Brewster ran out the door to the neighbors, because he knew he could not stay there. Because if he stayed there, he would then take the heart attack. Called the ambulance. The ambulance came, hauled the uncle away, and the uncle passed away. So now they're living in this house by themselves, thinking, we can do this. But guess what happened? Finally, the social services find out that they're living alone, so they come knocking on the door and say, you can't live here alone. He says, I'm almost 16. I can do this. I'll get a job and support us. No, you have to go to foster care. You can't stay here. So he was talking to Bronette about what's happening. And of course, she's feeling really bad for him. You know, the mom, the uncle, and the things they know about him. One other time, he went to Tennyson's lacrosse game. Tennyson got slammed pretty hard, hurt his shoulder, and came out of the game. Bruiser came up to him and said, "What happened?" And when Bruiser left, Tennyson didn't have a shoulder problem. He went out and played one of his best games. But Bruiser did. So they knew that he had some type of I don't know what you'd call it, power. But anyway, Bronette wanted to help. So she said, you can move to our house. My parents can be your foster parents. And Bruiser said, I don't know. I don't know if that would work. And so Bronette said, I will check with my parents. Well, she checked with the parents, and the parents said, no way. The parents were in the middle of a divorce, and things were not going well at that house. Not well at all. But what happens when your kid keeps whining to you, wanting something, over and over and over and over? They gave in. They said, okay, they can move in. So then she had to convince Brewster to move in. So they moved in, and they took the room that the mom was staying in, because the mom and dad were not staying in the same room anymore. But when they came, it seems like the tension went away. the apprehension, the pain of the divorce. Tennyson and Barnett also felt it. Things seemed to be better. Even though the problem of the divorce was still continuing, it just seemed to be better. So it went on for a few weeks. Excuse me. But Bruiser, or Brewster, he was not feeling better. He was feeling worse and worse mentally. And so finally one day, Ronette came back from her school, and Brewster was already in his room. He comes out and he tells her, he says, "I can't do this anymore. I'm taking all the pain from your mom and dad and from you guys, and I can't handle it. It's overwhelming. I have to move out." Well, Ronette didn't like that because she also liked the utopia that he brought to the feeling to the house. So she says, didn't really say anything. She just said, "I got to go." So she went to her room and then left. So Brewster just went back to his room and just feeling miserable. And here comes Tennyson. And Tennyson was going to say, "Where's Brunette?" Well, Brewster come out and told him, and he says, "Man, you can't leave. Things are going so good here." And he says, I can't do this anymore. And Tennyson, so then Brewster said, "Well, where would Ronette go?" He says, "Oh, she probably went up to the swimming pool." He says, "It's closed." He says, "No, she just climbs over the fence and swims when she feels bad, when she's hitting." And so Brewster thought, "I better go up there." So he went up the street. He got up to the swimming pool and looked through the chain link fence. It wasn't good. Ronette had been swimming back and forth, and she got done. She started to get out of the pool. You put your foot up, and you start to lift yourself out, and her foot slipped. She fell back and hit her head on the concrete, and she was floating in the pool. And so Brewster didn't hesitate. Crawled over the fence, knew what was going to happen. So he jumped in the pool. It was a deep end. He knew he could go down to the bottom and then push off and push her out. And that's what he did. And so she landed up on the side, but the force that he used to push her out pushed him back to the center of the pool. He struggled for a little bit, then he went down. Now, Ronette is waking up. She's coughing, laying there, trying to figure out what's going on. But Tennyson comes, because he's wondering where they both are. He gets up there, and now he sees her laying on the side of the pool, and Bruiser is floating in the pool and sinking. So he climbs the fence. He can swim. He jumps in, yelling at his sister to help him, and she's just trying to get back from her unconsciousness herself, and they drag Bruiser over to the side of the pool. This is for dramatic effect. So then he's laying there, and Ronette starts doing, I forgot the word, CPR on him. This is before cell phones. So Tennyson ran across the street. He got the neighbors to call the ambulance. They knew they were going to get in trouble because the pool was closed, but it didn't matter. So the ambulance came. Bruiser was unconscious, and they hauled him away. Now, the author of this book that I got the story from, his It's a man by the name of Neil Schusterman. And in the book, God was never mentioned. I know another book like that. It's called Esther. But when I look at the story of Bruiser, I see a Bible story. A young man who loved his brother and took the pain of the whipping because he didn't want his brother to be hurt. Christ took the final pain for us because he loved us. Bruiser never lashed out at anyone. Christ taught everyone to love one another. When Bruiser was living in Bronette's house with all the pain and anxiety, he couldn't handle it. It was overwhelming to him. When Christ would be overwhelmed by his mission to save the lost, which was billions of people, he turned to his Father in heaven, and through prayer that gave him the strength to go on. Bruiser was willing to give his life for the one he chose. Christ gave his life for everyone, whether they loved him or they were his enemies. Turn with me to Isaiah chapter 53. And I'm just going to read. We already read this in the first part out of the hymnal, but it's so good. I got to read it again. Who has believed our message? I'm reading out of the NIV because I like the way it read. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of a dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, familiar with suffering, like one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he took our infirmities and carried our sorrows. Yet we considered him to be stricken by God, smitten by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him. And by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquities of us all. He was oppressed, afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like the lamb to the slaughter, and a sheep before her shearer is silent. So he did not open his mouth. By the oppression and the judgment he was taken away. And who could speak of his descendants? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was stricken. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. It's always good to see what Jesus did for us, and that there is no way we could ever repay him. And Christ doesn't want repaid. All he wants is your love to love the Father in heaven. Now turn with me to Romans 15, verses 1 through 5. Romans 15, verses 1 through 5. We who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. Each of us should please his neighbor for his good, to build him up. For even Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the insults of those who insulted you have fallen on me. For everything that was written in the past was written to teach us, to teach us through endurance and encouragement of the Scriptures, we might have hope. Okay? That little passage says a lot. The Scriptures are to teach us. We are to help others. And so I guess that's what attracted me to the story of Bruiser. He just had some of these elements. In the story of Bruiser, he was willing to take the pain for others, even to death. His mother knew this. That's why she had to leave them with the uncle. And the mom was right. He would have died in her place. This is what the story said to me. Even though we can't take the physical pain away or heal anyone, we know who can. Jesus is willing to listen to everything that we have to say to him. And with prayer and fasting, all things are possible. Yes, we can listen, and we can be there with people as they go through hard times. And you could help ease the pain by being there and sharing the promises of God with kind words and prayer. So what's the final message? Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Now, if we would turn to our closing number, page 512.